Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Wilkinson. Senator Waters.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks, for being here today. It's good that you've showed up. A lot of your member bodies haven't, so I'll go to that first. Are you aware of why Santos and Arrow have pulled out of giving evidence at these hearings?
No, I'm not. I suggest you should address the questions directly to them.
Well, we can't. They're not here.
I'm here to speak as a representative of the industry.
Okay, well, thank you anyway. You talk about the, quote, robust regulatory framework of environmental approvals and water management at the state and territory level in your assessment, in your submission rather. I'm sure you saw the Four Corners program where one of the Queensland bureaucrats indicated that far from a robust process, that she was pressured to issue parts of the approval within half a day and was instructed to not even assess the water impacts, that there not even be a water chapter in the Coordinator General's assessment report for one of those projects. How do you reconcile, how could you possibly describe that as a robust regulatory framework?
Firstly, just a comment about Four Corners. As you know, I was interviewed for Four Corners, and parts of my interview were aired with that, so I was available to make comment. I don't regard that particular documentary as any way balanced, and I think there was deficient in a number of areas. With regard to the issues raised by the Senator, I don't think it's appropriate for me to make comment about the internal workings of government one way or another. What I can say from the industry point of view are the processes that we did follow, the extended questions we answered, and the time period that we took to do those in a diligent and effective way. This took, typically this takes 3 to 4 years, about the same time it took to put the Sydney Olympics together. So I don't regard it as a rushed process. I'm aware that the industry did its utmost to answer all of the questions. I note, for example, that the Four Corners program left you with the impression that groundwater was not considered. It omitted to refer to the 200 plus report from very detailed consultants' reports that were in the EIS, the supplementary EIS parts of the assessment, and that there were several documents well addressing the issues that were raised there, but these were omitted from the Four Corners report.
Thanks, Mr Wilkinson. I think it was clear in the report no one was contending that the industry didn't do its own water studies. The clear contention was that the Queensland Government didn't do its own independent assessment of those very studies. So again, no one was contending that those companies rushed their process. The contention was the government rushed its assessment process. Clearly a very important part of the process, and that independent ground truthing which should have gone on and didn't go on. But you say it's not appropriate for you to comment on the internal workings of government, and yet you contend that they are a robust regulatory framework. So you can't on the one hand shower them with glory and then refuse to comment. I'm just seeking to understand why you think it's robust when we've had whistleblowers say how rushed and unrobust, for want of a better word, it is.
Well, I think they are very distinct and different things. One is the framework, which is the regulatory process that we go to and diligently follow. The other part is I would regard as management of the resources or the people associated with going through that process. So I regard one as a management issue, and I'm not surprised to hear of individuals in a very complex process such as this is that have raised concerns. I think the whistleblower process should work. It's an important part. We use it in industry as well as government to raise those concerns where they are, and they should be properly addressed. But as a broader generality, it wasn't my observation that this was a general view across the board from the people that I was dealing with. Just to address in particular, Senator, your question with regard to the environmental process, the reason I say it is a robust process, the reason I say the framework is a good one, is because it has multiple layers, and I refer in here to the adaptive management, which is a part of our process. The EIS process, I think, is the first look of projects. It looks across the board, but it gives no approval to do anything. The environmental impact statement, which was the focus of the Four Corners work, is not an approval for our project proceed. It's necessary, of course, but it is not sufficient. but it does give the context of which the project approvals come. It then authorises you to make the next level, which is the environmental authorities. They're the ones where the rubber hits the road and the detail needs to come forward before you proceed. And then often as not, there's a third layer of very detailed piece. So there are multiple layers upon which you come back to review the environmental process, and that continues the entire life of the project. Coal seam gas projects are not ones where you make one submission and then it's set and forget for 30 years. There wouldn't be a day go past that authorities are not requested from the industry, approvals given and the dialogue worked on.
Thanks. So it's just a management issue, is it, when the government gives its staffers half a day to look at the voluminous reports that your members have provided to it? That's just a management issue. That's not a fundamental lack of independent scrutiny of the claims your industry makes? I think you address that to the Queensland Government of whether there is the truth of that accusation or not. I mean, I can't, as an industry, verify for you about whether or not that amount of time was made or not. It is one individual's assertion on a television program. I've yet to see what the response is, or even the investigations that the Queensland Government would put into that. Well, the response is that it's been referred to the Crime and Misconduct Commission. So clearly it's not just one individual's contention, it's a very serious matter. But look, I'll move on. You have made the contention that it's a robust framework, which is why I put those questions to you. I want to ask now about your reaction to continued concerns of CSIRO and the National Water Commission about the lack of scientific understanding of the long-term impacts on our aquifers and the lack of scientific understanding of the interactions between aquifers and coal seams, and therefore they're warning that we don't actually understand the consequences of punching holes through aquifers to get to that gas.
Without the specifics that you mention regarding the National Water Commission or CSIRO, I can't respond to the specific issues raised, but what I can talk to you about is the science that has gone into, for example, the water modelling and the science that exists for that. And I can
Has that been independently prepared, that science, or is that the science that your members have done?
Let me refer to the Queensland Water Commission study, which I happen to have a copy here with me.
It's been referred to them, but they haven't done the work themselves. They're just looking at your industry science. Is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not quite understanding. The Queensland Water Commission has performed an independent model and assessment of the impact of the cumulative impacts of the coal seam gas industry on the aquifers across an area the size of Germany. It worked in 19 layers, 1.5 kilometre squares, and where it got down to irrigated areas, which are very important, it went down to 250 metre squares. It's a very, very detailed report. I think it's absolutely the standard that we need to work through, and the science, as you can see here, is several hundred pages of analysis. What I think is interesting is that the result of this turned out to verify or come very closely to what the coal seam gas companies had been asserting had been as a part of their models that they had put forward. So for me, that builds confidence that the data and the modelling done by the industry themselves, by the various proponents, and what the Queensland Government put forward were very closely aligned. But I think I would support this. I think the Queensland Government should be commended for having independent, arm's length, funded by a levy on the industry to give assurance to all players, all stakeholders in the water resource of Queensland that has been properly looked at.
And did they do that study before they issued your approval, the approval of your members, QGC and Santos, or many years after?
It was a part of the process. There were several models done during. Obviously, if it goes over 4 years, there are several models to go. My experience is at least 7 occasions that the water model was studied, verified, updated, done again and again. Of course, this takes in account the key projects, the cumulative impacts. So obviously you can't do it on the first one, but the cumulative impacts are considered here. And I might say over a very long period of time, half a century.
Yeah, I believe that report was finalised after those key approvals were issued, but thank you for bringing it to the committee's attention. I want to bring you now, in the short time I've got left, to the Namoy catchment water study. Are you across the existence of that?
I have to defer to some of my colleagues,
Sure.
depending on how detailed your question
Sure.
is.
So we heard some evidence yesterday and some documents were tabled showing the projected groundwater drawdown from the combination of coal and coal seam gas, so not solely your industry's impacts. But then the remark was made that the study didn't look at vertical connectivity. Can you comment on that, please? And can you comment specifically on how much greater the groundwater drawdown would be were vertical connectivity to be included?
My understanding is it did look at vertical conductivity. In fact, I think the consultants, in our view, from our understanding of the geology, the consultants actually overestimated the vertical connectivity. That study, I think, had a number of conservative assumptions in it, conservative in the sense that they would tend to overestimate the water impacts. It also modelled a number of scenarios, one in particular that greatly overestimated anything that the industry would have the capacity to do. Even in those circumstances, the impact from CSG on water was minimal.
Okay, well, look, we'll need to get that clarified then, because we've had two opposing viewpoints as to whether a key issue was in fact examined or not. So,
I mean, that was another independent study. It was steered by a joint committee that had resources and agriculture and government on it. It was an independent expert was appointed to do the study. They did it according to the methodology that they thought was correct.
can I just ask one final question? How much do you pay the farmers to appear in your ads to say that they're loving coal seam gas and they're not worried at all about the impact on the groundwater quality or level of groundwater?
Zero.
That you're happy to go on record about that? Every
Should I
single
answer that? Yes.
person appearing in your advertising material, both televised and print?
Yes, I'm not aware of any remuneration being paid for that at all.
And the level of compensation that they were provided for access to their land, can you table that in due course as well?
You're now talking, that's a different topic. You're talking about landholders in general?
I'm talking about people that appear in your ads.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying you don't pay them to appear in the ad. Clearly they've been paid to allow you onto their land. When I say you, I mean your members. So could you please table the quantum of
I would like to point out, though,
remuneration that they're
many
receiving?
of those people were, people running buses and local businesses, small businesses. That wasn't just a cross-section of
the farmers I'm
landholders.
talking about.
I'd love to look into. There are can't do that without the consent of the landholder themselves, because that's the nature of the agreement.
Sure.
I'd have
Well,
to
if you
make
can
inquiries
table
there.
what information you're able to.